How's it, everybody? Welcome back to the Rocky Fern. My name is Luca and I have OI type 4. Today we're going to be talking about some really exciting plants, the carnivorous plants. And of course, carnivorous plants are found in a lot of different genera, a lot of different niches throughout the entire planet. Typically, they've evolved different adaptations to secure much needed nitrogen in what is typically a nitrogen poor soil or environment. Some of them have evolved really cool adaptations. In fact, the utricularia or the bladderworts have the fastest motion in the animal kingdom. And while we're not talking about bladderworts today, we're going to be talking about what are typically called your pitcher plants. So let's get into it. I do have quite a few different carnivorous plants in my collection, and while they represent just a small number of all the carnivorous plants in the world, we're going to be starting off with the North American pitcher plants from the genus Sarracenia. A really cool, diverse group of plants, typically found in the southeast portion of the United States, anywhere from Florida all the way up to Maine and even into southern parts of Canada, and as far west as Tennessee, Mississippi. Typically, they don't bridge the breadbasket of the country. So Sarracenia typically has a pitfall structure to it, a tall cup, and they usually have a hood over it to prevent from excess water from getting inside the trap. And then they kind of take it several steps further. They have all these downward pointing hairs that prevent flies or different insects from climbing out. They also, the way that they're built, just the structure of it, when a fly tries to take off, it actually creates air movements that suck the fly down or push the fly further into the trap. It's a very cool structure. On the hoods of these pitcher plants are nectaries that the plants use to produce these enticing attractants to get the insects near the pitfall trap. In the case of Sarracenia flava, the yellow Sarracenia, they produce conine, a very toxic compound that actually acts as a paralyzing agent to the animal, and it will actually get the animal drunk or the insect drunk, and it will fall into the trap. Sarracenia are freaking powerhouses when it comes to consuming insects. If you ever cut open a Sarracenia at the end of the season near fall and were to open that up, it's just jam-packed full of carcasses. They do an amazing job at catching tons and tons of insects. There's 8 to 11 different species, I guess varying on who you're talking to, but they have a very wide range, and they all have different types of morphologies to them. Some of them, like the leucophylla, can get really big, and others, like the minor, actually stay pretty small. They range in size from a couple inches off the ground all the way up to 3 feet tall on the pitchers. So one of my favorite Sarracenia that I have in my collection is a hybrid. It's the Barba Green. It has beautiful lime green colors mixed with really nice, like dark purple coloring, really dense hair covering all along the cap and along the throat of the plant. Barba Green is a hybrid between Purpurea and Rubra. Both of them are very colorful, small growing Sarracenia. Beautiful plant, very vigorous. It definitely showcases the hybrid vigor. Another favorite is the leucophylla. Leuco means white, phylla means leaf, so it has a white leaf. These windows that actually allow light to come through act as a false window to trick the insect to expend as much energy as it can trying to get out through these false exits. They get tired and then eventually succumb inside the pitcher plant. A very cool concept. So they have all these different adaptations to secure their nitrogen source that they've evolved to do. Another favorite of mine is Sarracenia psittacina. Psittacina is parrot-like. The whole family of psittacines encompasses parrots. And so they look like they have a parrot-shaped head. They're very different from other Sarracenia. So most Sarracenia have a nice wide open throat. The hood of the plant kind of encompasses the margin of the plant to kind of protect it from rain. Psittacina doesn't, though. Psittacina comes from a frequently flooded ecotype, and the traps lay horizontally. So instead of being a pitfall trap that is oriented vertically, Psittacina is oriented flat against the ground in a horizontal fashion. And what's awesome about this plant is the traps work underwater and above water, so they're kind of dual purpose, which is really cool. But they act as a lobster trap. So once an animal, aquatic or terrestrial, gets into the trap, the hairs keep directing it further and further down the throat of the trap, deeper and deeper into the trap. So it's a very cool adaptation, a further modification that Sarracenia psittacina has taken to secure its nitrogen source. So very cool. Sarracenia, the North American pitcher plant, very, very cool plant. They definitely need a dormancy. They can succumb a little bit to certain parasites like mealybug or aphids, but if you can get around that, they're very hardy. A lot of places in the country can grow them year round. Here in Hawaii, we have a much more difficult choice that we have to make. So we take them in and put them in our fridge, which I've done, and then they come back the next year super strong, very healthy, robust, but a very good plant to have in any collection and a powerhouse when it comes to eating flies. Definitely, definitely recommend. Probably 10 out of 10 for fly catching ability or insect catching ability. Okay, so we're going to move south to talk about our next carnivorous plant. It's a cousin of the Sarracenia. It's known as the South American pitcher plants. It's the Helianthera. Helios meaning sun and amphora meaning marsh, so it's really the sun marsh pitcher plants. Sometimes they're called the porcelain pitcher plants. They have a lot of similarities to Sarracenia in that they're a pitfall type trap. They're very vertically oriented for the most part. And unlike having a hood, they have what are called nectar spoons that are these little adaptations to the leaf that produce a bunch of nectar, which may or may not produce toxins as well. There's a lot of research going into what carnivorous plants toxins are being produced, if any. I mean, pretty much all the genres. So it's a very interesting field of study. But Helianthera have these little nectar spoons. They come from extremely wet and most of the time very cold environments. And so Sarracenia, they have that long tube-like pitcher. Helianthera do as well, but they actually have like a zipper, a seam up the dorsal surface of the leaf. And there's actually a little hole that allows the water to drain out. So they're getting rained on almost every single day. And so the pitchers would actually fill up and overflow and maybe even break and fall over if it wasn't for these little windows that allow water to escape out. They still have these downward facing hairs that prevent animals from escaping. And they also act as a filter or a screen. So when it rains and it floods out the entrance of these pitcher plants, they catch and keep all the insect matter that they've caught. Sometimes it's plant matter, but typically it is insect matter. There can be as many as 24 different species in the genus of Helianthera. They're very cool species to keep. Most of them are ultra highland in their growth patterns. There are some species or hybrids that grow on the kind of faces of these tepui that are a little bit more acclimated to warmer temperatures. But for the most part, I have a very difficult time growing Helianthera here because it does stay so warm here. I do have to use a cooling wall for the most part, and I use artificial lighting just to kind of keep them in a more shaded, cooler area of the garage. A lot of people in the mainland have an easier time growing these plants because they have air conditioning, which would alleviate a lot of the stress caused by heat. They are plants that have the juvenile form of the leaf or the pitcher, and then they have the adult form of the pitcher, the mature form. The juvenile forms, they don't have the nectar spoons. They kind of, you can see in these pictures here that they have just a bunch of kind of narrow tips. And then eventually as the mature plants start to produce more mature traps, you can definitely see that the nectar spoon develops. If you are keeping Helianthera in the tropics or semi-tropical areas, I would definitely recommend hybrids. They are much easier to keep. Although McDonald Day is one of my favorites, it's probably the prettiest of all the Helianthera, but they definitely require some ultra high highland conditions. Okay, so now we're going to move over to Asia, and this could include Australia, Indonesia, and Southeast Asia. And it's probably the best known of all the pitcher plants, and it's the Nepenthes genus. So Nepenthes has anywhere from upwards of 170 different species in the genus of tropical pitcher plants. And it's one of the only carnivorous plants that I know of that, for the most part, they're all vining. Some of them are scramblers, but for the vast majority of the species in the genus, they are a vining plant. And so what's really cool about these plants is as they climb up through the canopy, they're setting out all these leaves, and they're super modified, beautiful looking plants that can get as large as, 2 feet, and they can catch mice and rats and birds and bats, and they have a very diversified ecology. They have been noted as forming many different symbiotic relationships with ants, bats, birds, shrews. The list goes on and on and on. And they can be found anywhere from sea level all the way up into about 5,000, 6,000 feet of elevation they're very well suited for their environments, especially where the nitrogen levels are lower. They can definitely secure quite a bit of nitrogen through these modified traps. Some of these nepenthes have been shown to produce an alkaloid, a toxin that definitely helps the insect become immobilized, paralyzed, drunk-like, and they fall into the trap. There's a lot of research going on out there, and the verdict is still out if it's definitive being produced as far as a toxin to secure prey or what the case may be, but it's very, very interesting. Nepenthes can range in all kinds of colors. One of my favorite species of all time is the Alba marginata. You can see here that it has this white strip and a red base to it. Even the leaves are red. That white strip is supposedly designed to trap termites, especially when they're doing their nuptial flights. I love that we have termites here in Hawaii because I can't wait for this Alba marginata to do its job. They also come in a green form, a very beautiful, beautiful pitcher plant. That's a lowland species, so it's very easy to care for. Another dream wish plant that I had, that I have now, is the bicalcorata, the vampire pitcher plant. Very cool. They can get really, really big. They live in the lowland conditions, so super hardy. I definitely recommend anybody who's on the fence about keeping nepenthes to just definitely get a Bill Bailey, some sort of hybrid, a bicalcorata, whatever the case is, and try your hands at it because they're a wonderful, wonderful addition to keep. You can see here that nepenthes comes in a wide range of colors, a wide range of peristomes and lip formations and pitcher formations. They just fit a ton of different niches and ecologies where they can be found. The evolutionary pressure put on these plants has been immense, and it's incredible to see that their answer to these pressures has been to produce basal pitchers and upper pitchers, attracting terrestrial insects all the way up to aerial insects. It's a very, very cool process. They have red striping, they have splotching, they have banding, they have green color, red color, black color. Just a really, really cool diversity found in nepenthes, and it's such a wonderful genus to keep. Now we're going to move on to probably the pitcher plant that has the smallest range outside of Helianthera, and it's a monotypic species. It's the only species found in the genus. However, the genus has been moved around, and it's more closely related to like Oxalis, based off the latest taxonomy. However, this is the Australian pitcher plant, the Cephalotus, that is found in the southwest corner of the country near Perth, and it grows on these very sandy embankments that actually butt up right against the ocean. Sometimes, as California Carnivorous has pointed out, giant patches of Cephalotus will actually fall off of these cliffs and land up in the ocean, which is such a crazy thing to think about. Cephalotus is kind of considered a difficult plant. They definitely don't like to be too wet. They can rot more so than most other carnivorous plants. But I've enjoyed it. You can see here I've got some close-ups here of my Cephalotus. This is the Ebert giant clone. There's several different clones out there. But what's interesting is you can see here the peristome is very similar to the nepenthes as far as these like lip ridges. They're not closely related at all. It's just evolutionary convergence that pushed these plants to evolve similar mechanisms to secure the nitrogen that's needed in these environments that are very poor in it. And red color is a very, very expensive pigment to produce, and these plants have no problem, as you can see in this picture, producing red pigments, and it's because they're very good at catching the bugs that they need. One thing I'll say is pitcher plants and Cephalotus all have like a fingerprint pattern, but they all share, for the most part, an M, like a cursive M. And I think that is so awesome about this Cephalotus. They're very, very, very cool. They can get quite big, maybe the size of a cutie. That'd be a really, really big Cephalotus, but they can get that big, especially some of the giant clones. They can stay green, they can stay really dark. But they're very, very beautiful plants. California Carnivorous has an in-depth video on Cephalotus that I highly, highly recommend. They do a lot of in-depth details about how to keep Cephalotus, and it definitely helped secure my success when keeping Cephalotus. But those are the four main types of pitcher plants that can be found on the planet, and they range all the way from South America, North America, all of Asia, Indo-Asia, and into Australia. And while they're all super cool in their own way, I definitely recommend trying your hands at keeping at least one of those, if not all four. And then of course the many, many different species that can be found in these genuses. But if you like what you see here and you want to see more carnivorous plants, definitely tune in, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next adventure.